Mary's a motivational speaker, critically acclaimed author and poet, blogger, 2009 Boston Marathon finisher, polio and trauma survivor who has a remarkable story of resilience, healing, hope, and possibilities. She has a BS from Boston University and a master's in social work from Boston College, and is the author of 7 books, and her story has been featured on Channel 7 News, radio shows, podcasts, and in books. So please give a warm welcome to Mary McManus.
Thank you, Patty, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for being here. I know it's cold and snowy and icy, so I really appreciate you making the effort to be here. I want to make this interactive, so stop me if you have questions, comments. I want it to be very dynamic. I'm going to be sharing my story of how I became a Boston Marathon finisher at the age of almost 55. I still can't believe that. And then how I've gotten through setbacks, talk about resilience, which I think at our age, and I'm 71, I just turned 71. So I think that's a very important concept, especially as we get older. So stop me if you have questions. Let me just ask, do we have anybody here who's familiar with polio? Yeah, okay. And what about post-polio syndrome? You've heard about it? Okay. So basically, the runner within me, the Boston Marathon runner, and the adventures of Runner Girl 1953, as I like to say, was born in my imagination. I know that's a little bit jarring at first to think, oh my goodness, she found a runner in her imagination, but that's exactly what happened to me. So let me rewind and let you know about my journey. And again, stop me if you have any questions or any comments or anything. I had polio in one of the last polio epidemics in Westchester County, New York. I was vaccinated. I had 5 vaccines, but my best friend's mom was not vaccinated. And we were playing together, my best friend's daughter and I, or my best friend and I were playing together, and her mother and I came down with polio the next day. This was 1959.
So best friend was not vaccinated?
She didn't come down with it, so I don't know whether or not Susan was vaccinated or not, but her mom was not. Yeah. And my brother, he didn't come down with it. My parents, I was the only one for whatever reason. I was initially paralyzed from the neck down. I did not need an iron lung. I was called one of the lucky ones. However, in some regards, I was not all that lucky because my mom was addicted to prescription pain medication. And 3 years after contracting polio, my dad fell into alcoholism. So my childhood, needless to say, was extremely challenging. But what I did was I harnessed my intellectual prowess. And I was class valedictorian, I was a straight A student, and I basically ignored my body. And I had what I call a breach in the mind-body connection. Is anybody familiar with mind-body medicine or the mind-body connection, or have you heard or read anything about it? You have a little bit?
Huh? That's holistic health, right? The mind, body.
Yes, yeah. Let me just close your eyes for a minute. Just close your eyes for a sec, okay? I want you to imagine that you have a glass in front of you that has water with a lemon in it. And you're going to take the lemon and you're going to put it in your mouth. Okay, you can open your eyes. What did you feel in your mouth when I described that scene? Sour, yeah. Did you feel like the saliva to start running in your mouth at all? Yeah? Well, that's the mind-body connection. It's incredible. The mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what is imaginary. And I know you know, when I first heard about this, I thought, what? But I was very blessed to meet a nurse. And actually being in Cohasset is really special for me because she lived in Cohasset. And she taught me about Bernie Siegel, who is considered the father of mind-body medicine. And she, when I was in the hospital with an infection, she brought in his cassette tapes. And yes?
Who is he?
Bernie Siegel is a physician. He's now in his 90s, and he was the first one to talk about the importance of the mind-body connection in healing. And he worked with cancer patients. He was a surgeon in Connecticut, and he worked with kids. And he also had his patients draw pictures as a way to express what was happening in their bodies. He used these pictures for diagnosis, and he also used it to help patients understand what was going on beyond the physical body. And so this nurse, Beth Jordan, she brought in his tapes. And so I heard about him, and I did some mind-body work through the years, on and off. But in December of 2006, life as I had known it came to a screeching halt. And I was diagnosed with something called post-polio syndrome. I was told it's a progressive neuromuscular disease, and I was told to prepare to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. I was told that I needed to quit my award-winning career as a social worker, and we walked by all those pictures of the veterans. I worked at the VA for 20 years, and I was told if there was any hope of stalling the symptoms where they were. Just to give you a snapshot of where I was at, I had difficulty swallowing. I had difficulty breathing. I couldn't walk up the stairs in my house. I had just pain everywhere. I was so debilitated. And as it turns out, looking backwards, I realized that this was a result of the fact that I had lost the connection between my mind and my body. My body became something that I just tolerated, and I lugged through life. And I never experienced the joy of being in my body, of running free, of having a carefree childhood. And at the age of 53, everything came to a screeching halt. And I was told that if I had any hope of forestalling the symptoms, that I needed to leave my job, that I needed to adapt our Cape house or move into a ranch. I was told to use a wheelchair. I went into a toe-up leg brace. I used a cane. It was very, very shocking and demoralizing, to say the least.
And hard to watch too, you know, from our perspective, from our family's perspective. It was really hard. It happened so fast. So we're really grateful for the turn of events in probably in a couple minutes.
Thank you. That's my daughter Ruth Ann. My husband Tom is here, and I'm so blessed because Ruth Ann was the one who said, you know, this is serious. What's happening? She came with me to all of my appointments, and I went to a speech and swallow therapist, and they told me I had to go on a semi-soft diet, and I couldn't. I didn't have strength in my voice. It was horrible. But initially, I followed everything that they told me. And I went into a toe-up leg brace. I used a cane for mobility. I used a wheelchair for longer distances. Excuse me. And then, in February of 2007, I said, okay, I'm at a real crossroads in my life. I don't know what's going to happen. Do I have a future? Am I going to get better? Am I going to get worse? I had no idea what the future held for me, if in fact I had a future. My husband said to me, oh, Mary, this is a no-brainer. You've got to quit your job. I'm like, okay, I'm just 3 years short of retirement age. Somehow we're going to get me to retirement age. And he's like, no, we're not. He said, really, it doesn't make any sense. If you're not going to be healthy, what good is the income continuing to come in? And I love this quote from Joseph Campbell that says, we must be willing to let go of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. And so I took a leap of faith. Well, first of all, let me go back to February of 2007. So my husband was out with the twins, and it was, I just remember the day. It was a cold, dark day in February, as February can be, as we all know, living in New England. And I said, I need divine guidance. I started praying. And I said, I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads in my life. They're telling me I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, to expect an accelerated decline as I aged, because based on Western medicine's interpretation of what happened was the connection between the nerves and the muscles, that communication broke down when I had polio. And so as I got older and muscles and nerves wear out, that was going to cause an accelerated decline as I got older. So I just got still and I said, I know that I'm at a crossroads in my life, but what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family? I mean, we were a two-income household. And I started looking at all these new age thinkers, which actually is old age. It's the ancient wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So I had these printouts, and I was looking at them, and I saw this one phrase that said, I am so happy and grateful now that I can, ... I'm like, so happy and grateful. What? And this is a really big thing. It's easy to be grateful when things are going well. But how are we grateful when things are not going so well? And I found that that was the time that I need gratitude the most in my life. You all agree? Does anybody do a practice of gratitude? Like, do you say gratitudes in the morning? Or you do. Tell me what you do.
Well, you just mentioned you prayed and you needed divine intervention. And I was going along in life, and at a certain point I had a crisis. And they suggested I go see a psychologist, which I did. And after the third visit, I said to myself, this is going to take a long time. It's very expensive, And like you, when you say God, how do you define that? I really didn't know. I knew it in name only, God, G-O-D. Well, what did that mean? But in that moment, there was a sense of, like a prayer. I said, like a prayer. I need help, okay? And in that moment, in my spirit, I heard this, not audible voice, but, Libby, you've tried to do it all yourself. Now come into me and let me do it for you. And in that moment, I instantaneously, without any hesitation, said yes. But in that moment, I also sensed a tremendous change within me. And I knew that I didn't need a psychologist anymore. And from that point on, the Spirit of God started to move me in that more spiritual direction. And when you're talking about mind and body, through all these years that I've experienced this, because I have the right spiritual attitude in life, it helps my physical body. Now, I don't usually share this with people, but I'm 96 years old.
What?
Yes, I am.
Wow.
Every time I go to the doctor, I can't believe it. I said, believe it.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to tell you, like you're talking about, when you have the right mind frame, it connects with your emotions and it connects with your body. and there's healing there. And I only take one medication, and I'm gonna get rid of that someday. Okay? I'm gonna continue this way, in my own way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it does help us when you have the right frame of mind. And for me, it's faith. And when you
Yes.
have the faith and you seek the divine creator who created us, who still is there to help us. In fact, I was just hearing a message today from Isaiah about that God wants to heal us.
Yeah.
He wants to help us. He wants to guide us in life. And this is really where I'm coming from. And yeah, I've been blessed with a long life. I'm doing very well. I only use the cane because of my balance. But it's similar to what you're talking about.
Wow.
We have to really realize that we just can't look at the externals. We've got to look at the internal and seek that mind. That they say, renew your mind, the mind of God, the mind of. For me, it's a Christian, the mind of Christ. And when you put that mind on, it helps you with everything else. Your emotions, your body, everything.
Well, you just finished my talk, so. No, but thank you for sharing that, because
Well,
that's.
I couldn't help it because there was such a connection between what you said about mind and body.
Yes.
That I had to connect it with, for me, it's a spiritual experience.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me on this day in February of 2007. And I had all these papers spread out over the table, and I'm so happy and grateful now that. And it was imagining gratitude for something that I wanted in the future, but feeling as though I already had it. It was going beyond being in a toe-up leg brace. It was going beyond needing to quit my job. It was going beyond having difficulty swallowing, being on a semi-soft diet. It transcended all of that.
You always say believing is seeing, or seeing is, believing is seeing.
Believing is seeing, yes. And I sat down at my laptop and I wrote a poem. The answer to my prayer came in the form of a poem. And the title of the poem is Running the Race. Now, I was sitting there and saying to myself, why are you writing about running a race? I'd never run a day in my life. I was called Easy Out Alper in gym class because as a polio survivor, that was my maiden name. As a polio survivor, I was horrible in gym class. And I was saying, why is this? Now, it's a very long poem, but I want to read the last couplet to you, the last 4 lines. I'm now off the sidelines, no need to sit and whine. So much gratitude fills my heart, and love and beauty shine. After all these years, I can join the loving human race. I exceed all expectations, and now I set the pace. And within the poem, there was, in my mind's eye, I'm winning a 10K race. And I did. I sat there and I was just kind of in awe of why am I, A, writing a poem, and B, writing a poem about running the race. Well, I'll tell you more about why it was it was poetry, and it was in the cadence of Dr. Seuss in a minute. And lo and behold, that poem foreshadowed my 2009 Boston Marathon run.
That was prophetic.
It was absolutely a prophetic poem. And I love this quote from Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. Alice laughed. There is no use trying, she said. One can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. Why, when I was your age, I always did it for a half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. And so I started a gratitude practice, and I looked for all the things in my life that I should be grateful for. Now, keep in mind, I could barely climb up the stairs. Work became so challenging for me. It was also heartbreaking because I would push my veterans around in their wheelchairs and I would take them to different clinic stops. And that was a very important part of our work together. And so it was really painful for me. And I knew I couldn't stay at the VA. I said the day that I'm no longer able to care for my veterans and their patients the way I want to, I would have to leave. But of course, there was a lot involved in getting ready for that leap of faith. And so poetry it was like a spigot was turned on in my soul. And poetry started pouring out of me at warp speed. And I do want to read this poem to you. It's called The Gift of Polio. Thank you, God, for the gift of polio that brought me so close to you. And just to back up for a minute, when I had polio, I actually had a vision. I had an out-of-body experience. And I saw my guardian angel. And even though I couldn't move, I was invited to step into a well bucket. And I was reeled up to meet this being. And then everywhere I looked, I saw this being. And I made a conscious choice, this is at the age of 5, to return to my body. And people who've had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences do talk about the fact that you can make that choice. Somehow I knew, despite the horrific situation I was in with polio and with my parents, that I was going to make it through. So that's the first line. Thank you, God, for the gift of polio that brought me so close to you. While paralyzed, I saw your face, no matter what I do. Many wonderful healers, you sent them to me at age 5. Perseverance and triumph, life's lessons learned, but my spirit could not yet thrive. At age 53, the gift was sent to me a second time. Having time to sit and feel, to heal, I started to rhyme. The second time felt worse than the first, yet your love and wisdom I found. Out of pain and weakness and fatigue, a remarkable spirit rebound. Reliving all the trauma of special shoes and such, I discovered remarkable healers who brought a loving touch. I had no clue I had such strength and the ability to grow. No matter what the outcome, deep gratitude I show. This gift so precious, I live a new life. Gratitude flows from me. My heart and soul are filled with grace. Each day's a gift from me. So I was beginning to feel gratitude. I was beginning to feel something beyond myself. I was beginning to feel something more than what was happening in my body. And I want to share with you a little bit of the research about the mind-body connection. And one of my favorite things that I just think is so fascinating is from Dr. David Hamilton. He's just an amazing person. I reference him a lot in my books. And he used to be a pharmacist. He used to do research in clinical pharmacy. And he realized that he wasn't happy doing that. He has a PhD. And he became fascinated with the placebo effect. So he's done a lot of research in his own right, but then he also reports out on research. And I just think this is like one of the coolest research studies. They did it at Harvard University. They had 2 groups of people. One who practiced the piano. So they played, you know, bum, bum, they practiced scales, bum, 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 bum. Then they had another group that imagined themselves practicing the scales. Well, do you know that the muscles in the fingers and using a functional MRI, looking at what changes happened in the brain, there was very little difference between those that actually played the piano and those that imagined it. So here I was imagining myself as a runner. I had a dream one night that I came out of my leg brace and I was dancing like Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain, and I was just splashing and everything. And I wrote a poem about come out and play. So all this while, I'm imagining a future very different than the one that was predicted for me by Western medicine. And God bless them, you know, Western medicine knows what they know, but many of us know that there's something more that happens. And there is something called neuroplasticity, which means that even though my nerves and muscles were damaged from the initial polio virus, I was able to make new connections. And a lot of my poetry talked about rewiring and rewiring this old house. And actually my story is in David's 10th anniversary of How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body. He put out a call for stories. And so I shared mine. And mine, of course, started with the Boston Marathon, and that was absolutely phenomenal. But then I had some comeback stories that I'll share as well. But having people around us as well. I'm so blessed with my loving family. I also had an incredible pain management doctor who did cervical spine injections. And I called him my master magician, Dr. Omar El Abd. And he said, oh, we can get rid of this pain. I had so much pain everywhere that it was hard to know like what could be treated and what, like where to even begin. But they started with cervical spine pain. Dr. El Abd referred me to a physical therapist. Her name's Allison Poole. And she said, you are not destined to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. She said, we can reconnect the mind and the body. You can get stronger. And I saw her at Spalding Rehab, which was near my office at the VA downtown. So I worked with her 3 times a week. And not only did she work on getting stronger physically, but she taught me how to take deep breaths. And we worked together to begin to reconnect the mind and the body. And I was terrified to leave my job. I mean, I have to be honest about that. And she said to me, okay, I'm going to show you what your job is doing to you physically. And she took me into a room and hooked me up to a biofeedback machine. She said, I'm not even talking about the emotional stress of caring for your veterans, their families, and your colleagues. I'm just talking about being on the phone, sitting in a chair. And so she showed me the spikes of the stress. She said, we can do a lot together in outpatient therapy, but if you don't leave your job, you're not going to be able to fully recover. And so she really encouraged me to pursue my passion as a poet and a writer. Now, my team at the VA, I love them. To this day, we're still in touch. They thought I had lost my mind. They said, you can't make a living as an author. You can't, poetry? Who's going to buy poetry? Well, I started a little business at the encouragement of my husband and my daughter called New World Greeting Cards, Inspirational Poetry. New World Greeting Cards, personalized poetry for every occasion. So I did personalized poems, like you tell me who you wanted a birthday poem for, you tell me what you like about them, and then I'd weave it into a poem. And so this is a good point at which to share with you why poetry and why the cadence of Dr. Seuss. I had a physical therapist, Miss Holly, after contracting polio. Talk about an earth angel. I can still, this many years later, picture her. She had curly hair, and she had this wonderful smile. She was one of the most gentle souls you would ever want to meet in your life. And I've been so blessed to have these people come into my life from time to time. And Miss Holly would sit me up on a chair in the doctor's, the physiatrist's, rehab medicine doctor's waiting room. And she sat me up on a chair, and there was a round table with Dr. Seuss books on it. She'd have me choose one. And she'd say, okay, we're going to read this before you come in for your treatment. And during the treatment, they were so painful, they used something called the Sister Kenny method, where they put hot woolen blankets. I can't wear wool to this day. Hot woolen blankets on your leg and coax the muscles and nerves back to health. So she was way ahead of her time, and she would have me recite back to her in tandem the Dr. Seuss book. It was usually The Cat in the Hat. So that cadence stayed with me. And Oliver Sacks, who wrote The Man Who Mistook His Woman for a Hat, he was a neurologist who really studied how the brain works and things like that. He actually did a study of people who listened to different kinds of music as children, and then he would put that music on, and they did a functional MRI to see what would light up. And sure enough, the music from childhood lit up much brighter than the other things. So this cadence of Dr. Seuss was in my heart and in my soul. And I just absolutely, literally felt no pain when I wrote poetry. It was magical. So here we are. It's now February of 2007. I'm writing poetry. I'm thinking about how am I going to leave my job. And in April of 2007, I went for a mammogram. And I was told I might have breast cancer. And I said, okay, universe, this is ridiculous. This is a little too much. Well, what I did was I started visualizing. I started meditating. And I started imagining that I only had healthy breast tissue. And I did that for 1 solid week before I went back for a repeat mammogram. My daughter can bear witness. She said, you really do have a lump. Oh my God, what are we going to do? So I said, I'm going to visualize, I'm going to meditate. And we'd actually done that. We'd done some meditation and visualization after Ruth Ann broke her arm when she was a little girl. And the doctor told us that it was going to need surgical repair. And I said, Ruth Ann, we're going to visualize this back into alignment.
A lot of ice cream.
Oh yes, and a lot of ice cream for the bone. You hated that part of it, right? But the bottom line was she didn't need surgery. So we knew about this. And so I visualized. I go back for my mammogram. Did anybody ever watch American Idol with the golden ticket to California? I'm going, yeah. So I come running out of the mammogram, and I said, I got my golden ticket, I'm fine. And I come home, and my daughter Ruth Ann says to me, you're done fooling around, Ma. You gotta put your end date at the VA. She said, how much notice do you have to give? I said, well, at least 6 weeks. She got a calendar, she circled the date, May 25th of 2007. She said, you're done before something else happens. So on May 25th of 2007, I took a leap of faith, total leap of faith, and I left my award-winning career as a VA social worker. And then I really got to work healing my life. I actually had written my first book of poetry, New World Greetings, Inspirational Poetry for a New World. And I went to a literary festival. I mean, I was really doing all this. And in October of 2007, I just happened to meet a woman whose name is Janine Hightower, and she was a personal trainer. Now, we hooked up because she was going to help me with my business, my little greeting card business. But long story short, she had a personal in-home training business. And so I'm listening to her about my business, but I'm really listening about in-home personal training. So I said, well, do you think I can get stronger? And she said, well, whether you think you can or you think you can't, guess what? You're right. She said, let's give it a try. So the first time I met with her for my assessment, I could do nothing. I mean, diddly squat. No squats, no nothing, no push-ups, nothing. I was just so deconditioned, so debilitated, even though I was better than I was. So we got to work together. February, something about February. February of 2008, Janine said, you're really doing much better. Like, I could get off a low toilet seat, I could get off the couch. She said, what do you want to do now? And I said, well, I'd like to get rid of the leg brace. I want to feel free in my body. And I'm saying, I was a ballerina before I had polio. Could I take a dance class? So she packed up she's writing everything down, packs up all of her things. And I said, wait, I have one more goal. And she sort of looked at me. She had her hand on the doorknob, had her bag and everything. And she said, what is it? I said, I want to run the Boston Marathon next year for Spalding Rehab. They have a Race for Rehab team. And she kind of looked at me, put down her bag, and she said, well, my dear, you're going to need a pair of running shoes. And so it began. And then I told my family that night at dinner that I had a new goal. And they were like, yeah, right. Oh, well, we'll run it with you. Sure enough, on April 20th of 2009, it took us 7 hours and 45 minutes to go from Hopkinton to the finish line. We raised $10,535 for Spalding Rehab. And so began my love affair with running. Now, I did have to take a year off because I was pretty banged up. And I went back for more cervical injections. I did more physical therapy. But, excuse me, I got back on the roads. And then in 2011, and I think this, again, we're speaking to resilience. In 2011, my nephew died by suicide, and I was crushed. I stopped running. I really, it was just devastating, needless to say. It was my son's firstborn, and it was just a really, really hard time. But I knew that I wasn't going to stay there. I knew that I couldn't stay in that place of, just despair and grief and everything. And I have a wonderful definition of resilience. Let me see, where is that? Okay, so how do we define resilience? It's the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. Sometimes it's not so quick, but the bottom line is however long it takes, we don't stay down, we don't stay in that state. So we actually were across the street from the bombings in 2013 at the Mandarin with our Race for Rehab team. It was the first time that I felt like, okay, I want to get back into life. And that reminded me of how much I love the sport of running. So I got back to running, and in 2014, I blew out my left knee. It was a mess. And I went for an MRI, and it showed that the cartilage was torn and a whole host of things. And the doctor, God bless him, said, I told you you never should have started running. And I said, yeah, okay, but what can I do to get back to it? He said, well, stop. And he said, you're going to need a total knee replacement. And I said, well, let's see what we can do. Let me get back into my mind body. Let me see what I can do. And as the universe would have it, I was sent to a really horrible physical therapist. I mean, I have been so blessed with so many incredible providers, but this woman was clueless. She was the absolute worst. And so I tried. We have this way of saying, well, maybe it's me, maybe I can make it work, et cetera, et cetera. No. So what happened was I discovered a wonderful chiropractor. And he said, oh, we can take care of this. We're going to get you back on the roads. So this is in 2015. And we used chiropractic care. Now, one of the things that they told me from the MRI was that my gastroc muscle, the calf muscle, was gone. It had atrophied. And to quote the doctor, and I do, God bless doctors, really. But he said to me, oh, there's nothing we can do about that. It's gone. It's going to cause you problems. So it's just the way it's going to be. So my chiropractor, healer, Ryan, said, oh, let's grow a new one. And so we used KT tape, and he gave me gastroc strengthening exercises. He revamped my whole strength training program, and little by little, I got back on the roads. In July of 2015, I ran a 5K, and it was so great to be back on the roads. And at that 5K, it finished at the 50, there was the Bermuda Marathon weekend booth. Now, it had been on my bucket list to run in Bermuda. I love Bermuda. Our family loves Bermuda. Anybody been? Show of hands. Yeah. It's beautiful. So there they were, pitching Bermuda Marathon weekend. And before I knew it, I was signed up for another half marathon. And I said, yeah, I guess I should cap my distance. I'll cap it at a half marathon. So before I knew what happened, I actually ended up running 3 consecutive Bermuda half marathons in thank you, Ruth-Ann, in 2016, 17, and 18. And then I said, okay, Bonnie, I'm so grateful to you. You've done really well. I thank you for everything. And so I went back to 5Ks. In 2021, 2022, in 2021 actually, I had an adverse reaction to the second COVID vaccine. And my nervous system just went haywire. And I experienced weakness. I thought that I might have had something called Guillain-Barré, which you can get as a reaction to a vaccine. And I said, oh boy, well, I've had a good run. I'm very grateful. I'll do the best I can do. Well, my daughter had other ideas. She said, Mom, you haven't come this far to only go this far. You've got to come back. You've got to find a way to come back.
I said, you've got to do something about this. You're depressed, you're lying in bed all day, you've got to do something.
Yeah.
We signed her up for the Bermuda 10K.
Yeah, that's what we did for my 70th birthday. And that's the story of my comeback is in this book, in my 7th book. So I started training again. And it was just, the process of training was absolutely amazing. Now, unfortunately, in December of 2023, we ran it in 2024, I got COVID. But I decided that I was still going to run this race. I was going to give it my all. And as it turned out, I made it to mile 3, and my body said, nice job, Mary, you're done here. Keep in mind, too, that in Bermuda, the hills are just, they're more intense than Heartbreak Hill. But I had the best time, and I said, I'm still going to get to that 10K distance. Spoiler alert, on May 4th of last year, I just said, well, I've got a good base. I don't need to train again for a 10K. And so my daughter and I went out, and I went the 10K distance again. And now I'm back on a regular strength training regimen and doing my 5Ks. But I'm not stopping there because, life shouldn't be a journey to the grave unless you're going to be sliding in and saying, woohoo, what a ride. And so this year, people often say, well, what's next for you? So my next goal is to get to the half marathon distance again this year. And I've been so blessed to meet so many wonderful champions in the running world. And one person who we formed a really deep friendship is Bill Rogers. He's an amazing man, runner, champion. And I'm going to close with this wonderful quote from his book, Marathon Man. Our stories are proof that passion and purpose in life can lay dormant for years. But then one day, you find your desire, your dreams, your strength. It was in you the whole time. And once you find it, you'll never be the same. From that day forward, you'll put everything on the line, make every day count, test the limits of your heart, and embrace the challenge of your spirit. And that's exactly what happened to me. when I received and I say I received the gift of the diagnosis of post-polio syndrome, I discovered an absolute love of the sport of running, and what a wonderful metaphor for life, you know, that
After the reaction to the vaccine, I said, well, why don't we start small? There's a virtual New Year's Day race. Let's see how you do. And she PR'd that, personal record. And then I said, well, just keep building. Let's just keep building and seeing how you're doing. So small goals is also what really got you through as well. Like running for 30 seconds the first time you ran. I remember that. Just keep going, you know, setting small goals.
yes. And, you know, remember, you're not your diagnosis. I'm not a doctor, disclaimer. I'm not telling you to throw away your meds, although, but anyway, you know, there are things you can do, and the mind is so powerful. And my personal trainer said to me, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, quoting Henry Ford. So thank you, Ruth Ann. Yes, small goals, and celebrate your small goals. The first day that we ran 30 seconds nonstop, it was like, wow, this is cool. So I thank you all for your attention, for your feedback, for your just your wonderful presence here, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about my journey.
Yeah.